Not all AI is built the same. Pearson AI is built for learning. When it comes to higher education, learning isn't just about finding the answer. It's about building knowledge, understanding, and loving the journey along the way. That's where Pearson's AI comes in. It's trusted. With reliable Pearson content at its core, it ensures accuracy, protects privacy, and keeps learning on track. It's tailored, purpose-built for education. It adapts to the student's level, aligns to curriculum, and is personalized to every learner. And it's built into the Pearson tools students and educators already trust. The result? Students using Pearson AI are 23 times more likely to become active readers. 1 in 3 interactions showed students applying, analyzing, and evaluating. And 1 in 5 went beyond memorization, showing skills essential for deeper learning. Pearson's AI doesn't just support students. It helps educators to do what they do best. Our instructor-led design supports teaching, not replaces it, by reducing admin, scaling personalized support, and keeping educators in control. Available now to millions of learners and educators worldwide. This isn't an add-on, it's part of the learning experience. Because not all AI is built the same. Pearson AI is built for learning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of Shape the Future. I'm just looking at all the neat places everyone is signing in from. I see South Dakota, Jordan. I've seen Boston, Oman, Sao Paulo in Brazil, Uzbekistan, all the way to India, and thank you to the late joiner in Taiwan. So just wanted to give a shout out to a few of the neat locations I'm popping up. I saw you, Evansville, Indiana, just come in there. Okay, I like to do a little shout out from the locations before we get going. I find that pretty cool. Welcome back to day 2. As I said, it's wonderful to see. I saw a couple names as well of those in the chats that I recognized from yesterday. So thank you for returning. Those of you who are joining for the first time today, thank you for joining us as well. I'm Dr. Vince Liardi. I'm our global marketing lead for thought leadership and higher education, and I'm delighted to be here with you for day 2 of Shape the Future. Just a little recap for yesterday. Professor Kukurova, he challenged us to think carefully about one of the more pressing questions in education right now. And that is, how can generative AI best support collaboration, partnership, and learning? I think that distinction between performance and learning has really set the tone for this week. And I hope it's been sitting with you since yesterday. If you missed day 1, no worries at all. It's available on demand. Just go back to the Zoom page where you registered and you can watch the recording. I invite you to go back and watch it. Today, we're adding another layer on top of our learning because once we accept that AI is part of our students' lives, we have to ask a little bit more challenging question. And that's, what does it mean for us as educators, and what is education fundamentally for? I kind of think of that philosophically, and it's something that I've been pondering a lot lately with the advance of AI. And when authorship blurs and assessment gets murky, and it becomes harder for us to actually know like what our students are knowing and what they're doing in their day-to-day lives, where do our responsibilities best lie, and where do we draw the line on how to best support? So these aren't just practical questions. I think they're really strong ethical ones as well. And that's where today's session is going to take us. A couple quick housekeeping reminders before we get started. Questions are very welcome. Please don't use the general chat for questions. They will get lost. There's too much chat going on there. Please use the dedicated Q&A to post a question. The chat's open for connection and conversation. We love seeing the community come alive in there. Please just keep it supportive, professional, and please, and you guys were pretty good at this yesterday. I think we only kicked one person out for sharing a link they weren't supposed to, but no sharing links in the chat. Again, like I said yesterday, they can be a link to a book or something, and it can be very well intentioned and helpful, but just for security risks, you can imagine there's a lot of nefarious actors out there that could infiltrate something like this and share a link that looks okay, but it's not, and we don't want anyone having any security issues or being compromised in any way. So no sharing links in the chat. That's the first rule. Zoom has closed captioning, so if that's something that helps you in your local language as well, you can turn that on. I also saw a few comments yesterday, and I agree. The chat can get very distracting if you have chat previews on. So maybe you're trying to watch me speak right now, and you're seeing all the chats popped up, and you're getting distracted. If you click on that little arrow next to the chat and go to chat settings, you can turn off previews. That way you won't, be bombarded with the chat previews coming up in front of you. You can decide whether you want to keep the chat open for engagement or you just want to focus on the webinar and don't have the chat. So totally up to you. I just encourage you to change your chat settings, whatever works best for you. Other questions that came in yesterday was also there's no need to raise a hand. We're not going to call on you or anything. So anyone raising their hand cannot do so. Also, there will be PDFs of the slides. Our presenter today has graciously offered to share her slides. So those will be up later today, as well as Dr. Kukurova has also agreed to share his slides. So you'll find the PDF of the slides on the Zoom registration page for the session. And we hope that helps to go back and review some of the key content that we looked at. Last but not least, there's still 2 more great days coming up. We have a session tomorrow that kind of goes in the inner workings of how LLMs and generative AI actually work. So if you haven't registered for day 3 or day 4's panel on preparing students for the workforce, it's going to be a wonderful discussion. Please register now. Share the registration portal with your colleagues, and maybe one of my colleagues can pop the registration link into the chat so you can share it with colleagues as well. This series keeps building. We designed it. So, we don't want you to come in for just the last session, but if you do, everything's available to watch on demand as well. Okay. Without further ado, our speaker today is Dr. Paula MacDowell. She's an assistant professor in curriculum studies and a highly recognized leader in educational technology and design. Paula's research explores how people learn with technology across the lifespan. This spans AI, immersive environments, and digital games. She's an award-winning educator and a mentor, having received too many honors to name, but those include the Lieutenant Governor's Post-Secondary Innovative Teaching Award last year, as well as the Provost College Award for Outstanding Teaching. What I find particularly compelling about Paula's work is that it's very value-driven at its core. She co-authors open access books on AI and instructional design. She co-authors them with her students and gets her students involved too. And I think that's a practice that itself speaks to everything we'll be discussing today. She also serves on the Immersive Learning Research Network Board of Directors, helping advance evidence-informed, inclusive, and value-aligned educational innovations worldwide. I think she's the best person to guide us through this conversation today. So with that, Paula, welcome, and the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vince, for that kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining from the world today. I welcome you. I am honored to be here to talk about ethical AI principles for responsible innovation in higher education. I have prepared a talk today, and like Vince said, the slides will be available. So that is something I've done for you. I want to begin my talk with a simple claim, and that is AI is not just a new tool that is disrupting higher ed. It is a stress test, and it is testing what we believe that higher education is for. It's testing our long-held assumptions about teaching, learning, integrity, and assessment. It's testing whether our institutional policies can match our stated values and whether we can respond with wisdom rather than with fear or with complacency. There are many promises of AI and harms that we can't ignore. We are not going to address all of these today, but I do recommend that you read a very deep and meaningful paper. It's called The Manifesto for Teaching and Learning in a Time of Generative AI. And it does go through a lot of the positives and a lot of the negatives. And I want to bring this up because I have framed my talk today around these tensions that we have many positives and we have many negatives that are all happening at the same time. These tensions, I argue, lead us to ethical paradoxes. So some of these ethical AI paradoxes in higher ed, there's 10 of them here on this slide. There's more of them. So as I'm speaking, feel free to add more paradoxes to the chat. All ethical conundrums are welcome here today. When I talk about a paradox, I'm using the term loosely, and this is to refer to how our ethical dealings with AI, they don't have consensus. Like what we have are attentions. And when we have values that we care about deeply, when they collide, it creates real tensions, and we don't have simple answers or simple way to resolve them. The tensions and the paradoxes remind us that the future of AI in higher ed is not determined by AI, but it is determined by the values that we choose to bring forth. So for the shape of my talk, I'm going to go through these 10 paradoxes. I will tell you what tension it reveals and also one useful thing that we can do. And to begin is the paradox of purpose. So the more that AI can do what once seemed uniquely human, the more contested the purpose of higher education becomes. So in the news, there are numerous articles that are talking about wonderful things for the future of higher ed. And also there's articles debating whether we're going to be around in 5 or 10 years. So there is, it demands that we now not just have mission and value statements, which we've always had, but we really need to make it clear to the public what unique value do we have in a world where machines can, rightly so, simulate human-like thinking and creativity. We've always said we prepare students for the future, but what does that mean when we no longer know what the future requires? This is an article I read recently in University Affairs on rethinking the role of higher ed in an AI integrated world. And it describes how we are now at an uncomfortable inflection point. So what purpose does higher ed serve in a world in which knowledge is increasingly automated? This is a time of uncertainty, but that does not mean we have to be uncertain about our values. We do know that we do not want to become more machine-like, more efficient, or less human. And so I direct you to a book by Kevin McClure. It's on the Caring University. This is not an AI book, but it is a wonderful book. And he articulates an ethic of organizational care, proposing leadership practices that make workplace well-being a structural commitment. And this book has a vision and practical tools for how we can cultivate academic environments that are grounded in care and community and shared responsibility across disciplines. Another book I highly recommend is called The Pedagogy of Kindness. And in this book, Catherine Denial, she talks about how higher education institutions fail students, fail instructors, and fail the broader higher education mission when they are not kind places. And if you're wondering why I'm bringing up kindness, I will just let you think about this for a minute, how important it is to be kind. So I keep reading articles that researchers are trying to determine when we'll reach AGI, or if super intelligent future AI does indeed take over the world. Well, we hope it will be kind to the humans who created it, right? Kindness matters. I have named all my AIs that I use. They've all got first names, and I say my please and thank yous just in case. The next paradox, and this one to me, I think is incredibly important because it has to do with trustworthiness. And the more AI makes information appear credible, the less certain we can be of its trustworthiness. So you see the paradox. These statements seem to contradict, but they are indeed both true at the same time. And a reminder, AI is not inherently trustworthy, nor is it in service of humanity or societal well-being. And its impact on higher ed, it's going to be decided by our learning design, our leadership, our values, and our shared vision for the future. Ethan Mollick wrote a wonderful book on co-intelligence, living and working with AI. And he talks about how you can no longer trust that anything you see or hear or read was not created by an AI. So this creates a problem in higher ed because we have spent decades teaching students how to find credible sources. Now we have a harder question to answer. What does credibility even mean? He also points out that whatever AI you are using right now, today, it's going to be the worst AI you will ever use. And this is a problem. If you think about the disruption that happened when ChatGPT was released to the public, that was about 1,000 days ago, maybe about 1,200 to be more exact, because that was November of 2022. And if you think of all the advancements that have happened just with that one particular AI, we don't have a crystal ball to know what's happening in the next 1,000 years. 1,000 years, the next 1,000 days. 1,000 years is a lot of crystal ball gazing. But we do know higher ed has always relied on trust, and trust in knowledge, trust in authorship, trust in our assessment, and that is now being disrupted. So some things, what we can do if you are an instructor in higher ed joining us today. I'm a professor in a college of education, so I work with pre-service teachers, and I also work with teachers in a grad program. And it is not enough to talk about AI in the syllabus at the beginning of the course. I argue you really do need to be talking about responsible and creative use of AI at different checkpoints throughout your course. This is what it would look like in one of my classes. It will be different in different disciplines, but the point here is you need to have mini lessons, not to take over the entire content of your course, but checkpoints where you're checking in with students on responsible use of AI, their AI awareness, their ownership of their academic work, how to deal with integrity. And it's something that does need to be embedded in courses in order for us to have trustworthiness. Next, we're moving on to the paradox of assessment. And this is a big topic. I know it's a real hot topic right now in higher ed. We value deep, meaningful, authentic learning, yet we still are designing transactional assessments that make it easy for students to offload their thinking to an AI. So this paradox is that the problem is not just the students that are using too much of AI, but also we do need to be taking a look really at our assessments. And here I'm going to point you to some work by David Wiley. And he talks a lot about renewable assessments And that asks students to create work that adds value to the world in some way. And this is as opposed to a disposable assignment where, like a student writes a paper, the teacher grades it, returns it, the student glances at the grade, and, then that's it. The renewable assessments are as Vince mentioned in the introduction, I do a lot of open education resources with my students. So we've made textbooks on AI and instructional design. My students right now are making resources for teaching their students in K to 12 how to question AI and how to be more questioning and critical of the technologies in our world. And we create these as renewables that we can also share with each other. There's a high consensus that faculty do believe that assessment redesign is needed. This statistic is from the Digital Education Council survey in 2025. So that is, we've got consensus there. What we lack is time. David Wiley has another paper, and it's called Asking a More Productive Question About AI and Assessment. And in this paper, he talks about like prior to AI disrupting assessment, about it being kind of like a murder mystery. So there's this contaminated crime scene now where we're trying to like discern if the student has been using too much AI, what part is written by the human, what part is by the student. And I liked his metaphor because it's kind of thought-provoking in terms of it isn't a murder mystery, but it is difficult to measure student learning. Now in a world that we do have AIs, what kind of evidence do we find persuasive to measure learning? How can we actually make assignments that are deep and meaningful learning experiences for students, but also relevant? And sometimes I think we don't give students enough credit. They are really hungry to learn and want assignments where they can put a lot of effort into it. So we want to be giving them opportunities that are really relevant and just give them opportunities that they can learn and shine and not be so tempted to use too much of AIs. Which then, though, does bring us to cheating. And cheating is a complex topic right now in higher ed. Students are expected to demonstrate their own thinking, yet they are learning in a world where outsourcing that thinking is often more efficient and harder to detect. So the paradox here is students, they're under pressure to perform, to meet high expectations. And how are our systems set up to reward them? Do we reward genuine learning, or are we rewarding something else? The cheating that is happening now with AI does not necessarily mean students don't care about learning. It means that they're navigating competing pressures and expectations about what success requires. On the left is a recent survey of why students cheat, why they are using generative AI. And this is completed by Inside Higher Ed. And the top reason is pressure to get good grades. And it's important to understand why students are cheating if we are actually going to address this and have environments where this cheating is not such a problem. There also is the belief that everybody else is doing it. So it's kind of like catching on, thinking like, mirror neurons, that everybody else is cheating, so I don't want to be left behind and not cheating. It is complex in that, like, students now, they're navigating systems where the meaning of authorship and thinking that effort is shifting. A book that I really recommend everybody who's listening today that you all read. It's called The Opposite of Cheating. And in this book, they talk about how assessment practices such as rigid deadlines and high stakes grading, excuse me, too many standardized tasks, and different performance pressures, how they actually can incentivize students to use AI for cheating behaviors. Cheating is a symptom of a number of problems, primarily with pedagogy, the culture of higher ed, and a mismatch between students and instructors' expectations. And that's not what we want. We want to be on the same page or more on the same page. Here is the paradox, again, explained in a different way from two different reports. On the left is the 2025 survey by EDUCAUSE. They were surveying higher ed students and technology. And if you look at the statistics there, 52% of instructors prohibit any use of generative AI. 34%, some instructors prohibit it, and then 13% say they allow it. So, all right. But what isn't reasonable with that high amount of prohibiting generative AI use, if you look to the right on a survey by the Higher Education Professional Institute, 95% of students use AI in at least one way, and 94% say they use it in their assignments. So here, what happens when students are using AI, as on the right, but they don't feel safe to talk about it? And the chart below on the right here, that also is findings that align with EDUCAUSE on students not it being acceptable to be using generative AI in their work. So this leads to what we absolutely do not want to happen in higher ed. This is the absolute worst case non-example scenario that we don't want, which would be the dead classroom. And this is where there are not humans anymore, just computers and machines teaching and grading other computers and machines. And if you have been following in the news, there recently was an AI agent called Einstein that could actually go into Canvas and complete the assessments and the discussion posts. So in this scenario, which we do not want, is where the student tells their AI agent to go on and do the necessary work. And then the professor uses their AI agent to grade the student's AI agent's work and then come a grade. And this is where just we have computers teaching other computers. We do not want this. We do not want this stealth use of AI. And that brings us to integrity. We claim to value academic integrity, yet our responses to student violations do not always model the values that we hope students will learn. So this one is very important to think about because integrity is such a bedrock of our higher education institutions. And we do want to hold students accountable, but then we want to uphold human dignity, fairness. And here I want to direct you to very thoughtful work by a colleague that I have here in Canada, Dr. Sarah Eaton, and she's at the University of Calgary. She is, in my opinion, like the leading expert on this area of integrity and using AIs in ethical ways. And she has done research and has leadership showing there's different approaches we can take to academic misconduct. We can take a punitive approach. And that in a punitive approach, relatively easy to track and monitor. We do hope that the punitive approach is fair. There also is another way to respond to academic integrity, and that's a more educational approach. And this is where students have the opportunity to learn and to learn how to care about academic integrity. And they then get to build their skills, and they get to hopefully learn better and do better. But this is a more an opportunity for students to learn as opposed to being punished. And then there's another approach, which is a more restorative approach. And in this one takes the most amount of work, but the student, if they're the one that is guilty of the academic misconduct, then they have to repair that harm. They have to, if they were in a group and they used AI for that part, and then that caused the other students to have to do a lot more work to straighten out the correctness from the AI response. How do they then, restore that relationship with those peers, and how do they take accountability in their community? Another approach that builds on Sarah's Elaine Eaton's work is a preventative approach. So this means that rather than only asking how we respond when academic misconduct occurs, but how do we look at our pedagogy and assessment so we reduce the likelihood of it happening in the first place? And back to the book I mentioned about cheating, the authors claim that students are more likely to cheat if you design with your needs and your convenience in mind than if you design with their learning in mind. So if we assume students want to learn and design learning environments that support that motivation, so that means creating authentic assessment, process-based assignments, scaffolding, and scaffolding about AI throughout the course, so students know how to use it transparently and ethically, and having reflection around that. These are ways that can also reduce the academic misconduct. Now, we have the paradox of help. We encourage students to seek help to succeed, yet the legitimacy of this help is questioned when it comes from an AI. So we tell students, ask for help, come to office hours. But then we are also sending signals that some kinds of help don't count, or that they shouldn't be allowed. And that tends to be when it is too much assistance from AI. Hence, we have the paradox, because we are sending mixed messages to students, and it's like there's these invisible boundaries about what forms of help are allowed or what isn't allowed. And it's invisible because it's not explicitly made clear to students. It's not transparent. And then that leads to issues around equity in terms of who is able to get help. And at our institutions, we value inclusion, we value equity, and we want to be supporting all our students in good ways and fair ways. On this slide, what I want to direct you to, so this is something that's important to me in my classes that I teach, is looking at what kind of human assistance is valuable and what kind of AI assistance is comparable and also valuable. So if you look down to the roles, there are tutors, coaches, planning advisor, editor, assistants, and also a co-writer. So in this particular instance, it's looking at help that could come from a generative AI and help that could come from a human. And we talk about this as a class. So this isn't just something that I create and everybody needs to follow. It should be something that you co-create with your students and you talk about in your class so they understand, and not just so they can understand the different ways that AI could be assistance, not replacing their thinking, not replacing their need to struggle, but to be used to give them assistance. But they also, some of them need permission because some of them are just think that this might be cheating if they're using AI for some assistance. So it's something that needs to be talked about, discussed. It's a really good way to also build relationships with your students. And this is something that changes over time. It looked very different a few years ago. And I imagine in a couple years, I can only imagine what the kind of assistance will be like. A more simple approach is to also make it clear to students when it is, student-led, when they really don't need to be using AI, when this actually can be human agency and they learn to trust their voice, trust their own independent thinking, trust their reasoning. There's good reasons for that. And then there's times when student AI collaboration is acceptable and useful and can be quite productive. And then there's other instances where AI guided is useful. And I invite you in my slides to think about which slides did the AI create for me and which slides did I create. Now we move to the paradox of connection. This also could be the paradox of disconnection, but I'm trying to take a bit more of a positive tone here today. So the more that AI expands new possibilities, wonderful possibilities for teaching, the more intentional we must be about nurturing human relationships that make learning possible. And students are relational beings, and meaningful human connection is foundational to successful teaching and learning. But what's happening now, we didn't ask for this, but this is where we're at in 2026. AI has transformed what used to be a teacher-student relationship, an instructor-student relationship, and that's now a more mediated instructor AI student dynamic. So that has changed. And this is not just a simple like when do we embrace AI or not embrace AI, but we really need to be thinking about relational pedagogy and how we are able to build these connections with our students and how we're able to notice the work that they're doing and the growth that they're doing. Excuse me, be able to give them just that gentle, creative nudge and push when they need it. Those are things that really matter most is mentorship and presence, human connection. But it's challenged at a time when we have a lot of AIs, and what do they value? They value efficiency and being more machine-like. So we have to be a lot more intentional about not losing the human parts of teaching that we value. So here is a paper that I wrote, and there's a QR code. You could scan it, and I invite you to read it. It's on preparing educators to teach and create with generative AI. We did get a Best Paper Award. I wrote this paper with some of my students, and it has a lot of innovation in this paper. So when the generative AI explosion happened, I knew I had to change my courses, and it seems to be I've been changing my courses ever since, because there's been so many different new opportunities that we have had to be able to use the tools in good ways that helps me to build relationships and connections with my students. And also we have just really exciting projects. So you can read about some of the activities in this paper. This is from 2024. That's like way back then. I think I need to write a second updated paper with the new activities that I'm doing. But just to give you a few highlights. So I knew that once the generative AI came out, I did not want traditional discussion forums because the generative AIs could easily do those. So instead, I made a bunch of different activities, and we have had fun debating with AIs. We have had fun creating our own chatbots and then testing each other's chatbots. We've also created digital games around like using the generative AI tools and using the generative AI tools to help us write stories to anchor these games. So it's been kind of wild and really exciting to see what my students can do. We also, as I talked about the human in the loop and the need to have different checkpoints for using AIs in a good way in your class. So that's what we've done so that we've kept it very open, honest, transparent about what is happening. And I encourage you to use AIs alongside your students. This is a picture that one of my students in the class I'm teaching right now, she had this in her midterm reflection, and I thought it kind of fit here today. So some of the things that I'm doing in my class, they do align with this talk around AI and ethics. And when you use the tools with your students in class, you have the opportunity to really question the different tools. You get a lot of different perspectives. There's just a lot of time that you can experiment so that you find out what are the risks, what are the harms. There is now, like as Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, they all have study modes, learning modes. The You don't want the students just learning this on their own or learning it from their friends, because then that means they're mostly learning from AIs or from TikTok. So it's important to do this in an academic setting where you can explore the different functions. We are using tools such as Consensus AI and Research Rabbit alongside Web of Science to help look for papers and to get different citations that we can use in our research and in our design projects. So there's a lot of new tools that are going along, and it's a wonderful opportunity to critique these tools, to find the benefits and to find the harms alongside your students. Which leads us to the paradox of exhaustion. And here I want to talk about the invisible cognitive load of AIs. So the paradox, the more that AI is blurring the boundary between authentic and artificial work, the more cognitive energy we must devote to discerning what is accurate, credible, and meaningful. So we keep being sold that AI is going to replace thinking. And so that is partly true that we have AIs that we can offload a lot of thinking to, but it basically is displacing some of that cognitive labor right now in 2026. We'll see what happens in 5, 10 years. And there is, if you are exhausted, like I am exhausted, it's this hidden labor of discernment. And why I wanted to include it today as a paradox is because now what happens when this burden of discernment is shifted onto those who are still learning to judge well? And that is our students. That is creating more demands on them. And they are just learning themselves how to recognize quality and credible and meaningful research. That's part of their training that we're giving them in the academic world. But now it is it's an issue. Like we keep inventing things to save us time and to help us along, but it feels like we have less time than before. And just to explain this, so in the Future of Jobs report that came out in 2025, which will likely be very different in a couple of years. So this report does evidence the capacity of generative AI to substitute a human in a given skill. And the skill that is the greatest on here in the darker gold color with the highest capacity is reading, writing, and mathematics. So hence the concern about, if students are offloading too much of their thinking to an AI, that concern is real, but it also has an ethical conundrum to it in that there is this burden of discerning if this is credible. And so this form of cognitive labor is much less visible and it is very exhausting. So hence the paradox. Further, with this paradox of exhaustion, we have a black box problem in that we don't have the ability to see how these deep learning systems actually make their decisions. So without a window into the AI model's methodology, then how can we be certain it's unbiased and that it's accurate? Again, more exhaustion. Sustainability is another paradox and something that is a growing concern because AI is promising innovation. It's promising innovation, also efficiency, a lot of promises, but its growing environmental impact raises questions about whether this progress is actually sustainable. And this is something that many, many students are also concerned about and care a lot about. Kate Crawford wrote an excellent book, and she asks about whom do the AI systems serve? What are the political economies of their construction? What are the wider planetary consequences? And this book might take some of you a little bit out of your comfort zone, but I think that's what a great book is for, and I highly recommend it. She gives a message that AI is a technology of extraction from the minerals drawn from the earth to the labor from low-wage information workers to the data taken from every human action and expression. She reveals the hidden costs of AI from natural resources and labor to privacy, equality, and freedom. Which brings us to many, many questions. And a really big question is, where do we put the waste? And we have to think beyond a trash bin. AI produces environmental waste through extraction, energy use, water consumption, e-waste, and it doesn't make that waste disappear. It often relocates it into water systems, energy grids, and often to communities who may never see the benefits. It also produces social and cognitive waste like hidden labor, unequal burdens, vast amounts of content that demand human attention to sort through, verify, and manage. So the paradox of sustainability asks us to consider whether our technological choices are going to support a livable future. And my final paradox today is the paradox of hope. And how do we foster hopeful futures as we reimagine teaching and learning in this age of AI? And how the paradox framed is the more that AI disrupts the future of education, the more essential hope becomes. This hope is not a false optimism or naive optimism or wearing rose-colored glasses or avoidance of reality. It is hope in that the future is uncertain. And so it is hard work that we have to do and be committed to preparing our students. Hopelessness and despair are easy to slip into, and those are the options that we have. We can amplify hope, and we can also amplify despair through how we teach, how we lead, and how we design. There is a lot to think about. These are 4 rather dramatic different scenarios. If we were to do some, visioning, the OECD wrote a recent publication, and they have very nuanced predictions of futures in AI and higher ed. This is just a simple example showing that the future of higher ed is not determined. It is something that we are going to have to determine, and we are going to have to create together. And so in some of these different future scenarios, AI is a luxury, and that's where it's for the elites only. Another scenario is humanity is a luxury, and that's where human mentorship is a premium experience and learning is mostly automated. There are also harmful integration where um, the the higher ed falls under the weight of too many ethical failures, misinformation, environmental costs, distrust, policy confusion. This one shows why we want to respond thoughtfully, not reactively. We don't want fragmented solutions. We want humane solutions. And this is on the right, the humane integration is a more collaborative, ethical scenario. I do want to leave you with one concrete tool. And this framework is by some of my fellow Canadians as well. It's called REACT. And I like this framework because it's simple and it also puts the judgment and responsibility on the student to be learning their ethical judgment skills with AI. It's this is where you can go for more information. They have rubrics for guiding students when to use AI, when students should not use AI. They've got different questions, and the this framework gives students a very clear and dignified way to show their thinking and to be rewarded for it, whether they've used AI or they've chosen not to. The REACT, they actually do stand for reasons to use or not use AI. E is for evidence, A is for accountability, C is for constraints, and T is for trade-offs. So this is a simple decision reflection framework that teaches students to improve their judgment. It helps them state why they've chosen to use AI or not, how they're going to verify the outputs, who's accountable, what guardrails they should apply, what the trade-offs are. And again, it puts this responsibility to our students to learn. So as I close, I want to return to my opening claim that AI is not just a new tool in higher ed, it is a stress test. And what these 10 paradoxes reveal is how we're responding to that stress test, the gaps between what we say, what we value, and what our systems actually reward. There is no easy or safe road ahead. We need to design better learning environments, better AI policies, better academic cultures. And if we take those commitments seriously, then AI does not have to hollow out higher ed. Instead, it can be the catalyst that pushes us to recommit to what we have been wanting to do all along, which is cultivating humans who can think, who care, who can judge wisely, and who can act ethically in a very complex and rapidly changing world. This year, one of my goals is to help my students use AI more responsibly because our students, they are not just AI users or AI cheaters. They are creators, innovators, and our future leaders. Their bold ideas, their empathy, imagination, and leadership, that is what is going to help shape what comes next. And if we want a future where AI serves humanity, this future will not build itself. We must build it. And that is you, me, us together. And that's through every classroom, every conversation, and every act of courage. So thank you for being part of this conversation. The slides will be shared, and also this is a QR code that links to the slides. You can also email me at any point. I would love to hear from you, and thank you for your attention today.
Thank you so much, Paula. I'm sure the chat's going to go wild now. Thanking you for your wonderful talk. I love the call to action at the end. I think it was deeply human and really resonant for me personally. Your whole talk, from touching on authenticity, integrity, human agency, I think it showed us that these aren't obstacles that AI has created. I think they're invitations for us to be more clear and more intentional about what we're actually valuing in higher education. So I really think you gave us such a phenomenal framework for approaching that. And so I really want to thank you sincerely. Also, your timing was immaculate. We have just as for those of you who don't know, I asked Paula if we could wrap up like 5 minutes too for a little bit of Q&A, and so you nailed the timing, which is something that I haven't quite mastered yet after about 15 years of teaching. So I was reviewing the Q&A, and I did sort of bucket some of the questions in a few broader categories and try and distill those, and so we can get to as many questions as possible. So I have four that I pulled out, maybe five, if we have time. But the first one I wanted to ask is, it's sort of about what concerns you most about the way higher ed is responding to AI. Is there anything that kind of keeps you up at night or stresses you out about how you see in terms of higher ed's response to this advancement of AI?
Yes, that's a beautiful question. Because I work so closely with my students and my grad students, what concerns me is the confusion that they have around, is it okay to use AI? Is it not okay? Students that are writing a thesis, and can they put in a transparent way how they used AI to help them improve their interview questions? Like, there's so much fear, and we don't want to be coming from a place of fear. So it's not just AI that's a problem, it's the ambiguity. So that's what concerns me. And I, want a future where there is less of that ambiguity, and it just is more, clear as to how we can be honest about how we're using tools, and then just be transparent there, and not having so much of stealth use of AI, because that leads to that paradox of trustworthiness, and our institutions are based on trust. So we don't want to have just the appearance of trust. We actually want to have trust and value, and less confusion about how. And then the use of AIs is coming from mixed messages from so many different places. So
Yeah, that's great. And I also like when institutions are based on trust, and I couldn't agree more. Another thing I think when I think of higher education is that it's steeped in tradition, right? Our institutions tend to be very traditional, and we have approached education in the same way. Even for me teaching, I haven't the first 15 years of my teaching, I haven't morphed and really changed how I teach that much. And I think this has been a way for me to go back and sort of do a deeper level analysis on what do I need to change? How can I respond to this? So, and I think also we have to be okay with, I know ambiguity keeps you up at night, and I hate ambiguity as well. I think as educators, we like clarity, we like answers. But I think some of us are going to have to be a little bit comfortable with some ambiguity as we work through this, because it's a period of change, and it can be quite jarring. But I think, there is going to be some ambiguity, but I have hope that it will start to become more clear as we move forward. The second question, the couple questions came in around, how do we maintain that deeply human element of higher ed, right? We talked about, you mentioned trust, I mentioned tradition, but another thing about education is it's always been so human. And the face-to-face interaction with our students, and those moments where we see like a light bulb goes off, and we see the process of their work, and we see their struggles and failures and breakthroughs. But how do we maintain that deeply human element in the age of these, rapidly advancing intelligent machines?
So we need to keep asking that question. So that question has to be like, um, it seems like a basic question because we've taken it for granted, because we have you know, based our mentorship and based our teaching practices on human connection, on human relationships. And we need to protect those and we have to be intentional about it because we do now have machines that can make things much more efficient. And that's in terms of grading, it's in terms of course design, but there is a lot to be lost when we lose the human parts. And the you know, that the need to also like help students when they should know not to use an AI. Because just as you're asking me a question now, like I have learned, you know, how to trust my voice and how to be confident in my truths, which may be different from other people's. It's why I frame my talk around paradoxes, because who am I to, you know, speak the way of AI and ethics? I don't want to be too preachy, too over moralizing. I would like to invite people who are listening today to a call to thinking because you know, we are all, you know, people connected this way. So the ability, though, for students, if they are going to trust their voice and be able to answer a question that is their answer and not like grab their phone and have to ask ChatGPT, oh no, he asked me a question. What do I say? What do I think? Like, we don't want that happening. And it's through a lot of these human relationships that students learn a lot more than just like the content knowledge. Like they're also learning, you know, what they value, who they're becoming in the world. And a gentle reminder for everybody, the most powerful database that you have access to is not the ones in your phones, but it is the one that is in your head and inspired by your heart.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think one thing you know, make trying to prioritize is developing that confidence and that social capability of students. There were some comments in the chat about how, you know, COVID sort of, you know, it caused students to become a little bit more isolated and it closed us off from communication. And there's been research that shows that it has stunted development. And then soon after that, now there's this tool that you grab and you have answers on demand right away. So I think it's almost been like a double whammy of sort of stunting students' ability to think on their own and feel confident to socialize. So I encourage everyone to think about what you do in your class and how you can help develop those fundamental human skills that Paula and myself take for granted because we developed those in an era where, you know, the systems were set up where we could, and there weren't necessarily so many boundaries or constraints on that. So I encourage all of you to think about how we can help students develop those. Another couple questions came in around like ethical challenges, and there was a few different ones, but I've kind of distilled it and tried to ask, like, what do you see as the biggest, like, what's your kind of main ethical challenge that you see in higher education right now?
I think from the paradoxes, so those would be like the 10 that I think are the most worth sharing today. Of the 10, I think two that are most important. One is hope. Like we really do, and it's hope because it's hope with teeth. Like it's hard to be hopeful for the for the future, given what's happening with technology and geopolitically. Like, but you know, there is a it's hope because it is hard. Like it's hard work to do that and prepare students. And then with that one, the other one is trust because AI is like disrupting or destabilizing many assumptions that we've relied on in higher ed for a long time. And it's destabilizing our trust in authorship, our trust in assessment, our trust in even what universities are for. So that is something that is just concerning because if we don't have trust, then like nothing will be credible and everything will be negotiable. And you know, it just is going to be um, not not a future where we want. So that trusting part is there. And like without the trust, that's also where we lead to the dead classroom, right? Where where we can't really trust and rely on each other anymore.
Yeah, definitely. When you talked about the dead classroom, I was thinking of if anyone's familiar with the dead internet theory, I was like, that's a kind of a scary personal subset of that where nobody is, I saw someone comment in the chat and say it is scary. Like it's the only learning going on is through AIs. And then we're kind of just passive consumers and we don't want that. We want to promote critical thinking. We want to promote collaboration. And those are two things that I try and do to keep us human and connected. Final question, because I know we're at time and I want to respect everyone's time. Just very general one. How can AI enhance the student learning experience? Like I know you touched on it during your talk, but a few questions came in around that specifically that leveraging AI to improve or enhance. And I think it's a tremendous, while it has obviously these kind of issues that come in. That's the whole point of the paradox, right? I think it does have potential to step forward our teaching. So how do you think it could really elevate the learning experience?
So I love this question. Because it isn't just AI. Like we are at a time right now where we have emerging and converging technologies, and that includes the developments in AI, but also in digital games and in extended reality, so in AR and VR. And because of these emerging and converging technologies, we have like tools to create some of the most powerful learning experiences for our students, and they can also create them. So in my classes, we use all these different tools, and students can demonstrate their content knowledge in very creative and imaginative ways. My students think world building is one of the best assignments ever. And I get that on my course evals quite a lot, like best assignments ever. And it's because students have these new tools and my students don't have a lot of um, technical skills like an experience. So the tools really do level up like what a person without a lot of tech training could put their imagination and creativity and develop stories. And so using their content knowledge and creating like experience out of them. The students then learning is more interactive and joyful. Joyful learning can happen. And and there is just a lot of good memories that we also get to make together as we share the challenges, because there's a lot of challenges along the way. The challenges are also not mostly technical. They're like believing in yourself that you can, yes, complete this project and that, you can create the story and create the content and create the pieces and the digital assets and put this all together. So that's what I am having fun with all the different tools, and my greatest teachers are my students.
I love that. I won't even add to that because I really think that's a wonderful way to close this off. So thank you so much, Paula. The chat has been unanimously positive and it's hard to, especially around, I'll be honest, like getting someone to talk about AI ethics is it can be a very divisive issue, but at least from what I saw, the chat was incredibly supportive. I think the tone was positive, and I'm coming away with this kind of with a renewed vigor to approach these kind of paradoxes with deep thoughtfulness and integrity. So thank you so much, Paula. I'll close us out and just mention that actually first before I start closing us out, there is something on the screen here. At Pearson, we're deeply dedicated to trying to integrate our customers, our partners in education, and getting their thoughts and considerations into everything we do and how we design our products and our services and our family of tools for the students and the learners of tomorrow. So with that in mind, we have a research community called Outside In. If you scan the QR code, there's opportunities to connect globally with educators to help shape the future of educational tools, to participate in different research excursions, and also to earn some rewards or incentives as well. So if that's something that interests you, we have that on the screen as well. So yeah, so and then also if you'd like to learn more about our Pearson tools, there's a QR code there. We really kind of I hang my hat on the tools, and what we say is that they're trusted. We try and Paul, you talked about trust. We try and build our tools in a way that's trustworthy, and so that the information is well sourced and educators can trust them and students can know they're getting reliable information there. So if you'd like to learn more about our Pearson tools, we also have a code there. And so yeah, so now with days 1 and 2 in the books, we've talked about the why and the what, I think of learning science and of ethics. But I think the next couple of days that we have coming up kind of gets a little bit more into how. Tomorrow we go under the hood, we get a kind of a hands-on, demystifying look at how large language models work, which, it can be a little bit confusing in a black box. So I think tomorrow will be really helpful. And then on day 4, we close the series with a panel of higher education leaders, with enterprise executives, and with real students who have ambitions and dreams and hopes. And they're going to come on there and share those with you. But they're also going to be real and share some of, what's scaring them, what they're worried about in the future job market. So we're going to really try and unpack how we can get our students prepared to enter a workforce with confidence and capability. So 2 sessions left. I think, I'm a bit biased, but I think they're both unmissable. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you tomorrow, bright and early or late. I saw people from Hawaii at 5:30 in the morning, and I've seen people from the Philippines at 11:30 p.m. And it's just wonderful to bring kind of the world together and have thousands of us come on this call and really kind of learn together. So thank you so much for your time and attention today. Thank you again, Dr. Paula, and have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye.